In the bright city, everything was perfect. The towers stretched skyward like spotless needles. The roads never gathered dust, and people moved with a calm, fixed smile on their faces. The architects of the city had written the Book of Rules, which flowed endlessly across shining screens, regulating every moment of life. In this city there was no place for cracks, stains, or uncertainty. Aras was a mosaic maker, the only form of art allowed by the architects, the creation of flawless, single-colored surfaces. But in his dreams, Aras always saw beauty hidden in different colors, broken pieces, and unexpected patterns. He longed for a world where fragments could come together to form something greater than the whole. One day, while walking across the city's main square, he felt a faint crackle beneath his foot. When he bent down, he saw the impossible, a thin hairline fracture in the bright white pavement. This was the first recorded imperfection in the history of the bright city. Trembling with both fear and excitement, he reported it to the nearest overseer. The overseer's metallic face remained expressionless. Rule 7.4. All imperfections must be immediately covered with standard material. He handed Aras a flawless white tile. "Cover it," he said. Aras returned to his workshop with the tile in his hand, but simply covering the crack felt wrong. The crack was there. It was real. To ignore it would be to accept a lie at the very foundation of the city. That night, the broken pieces and vivid colors from his dreams danced vividly in his mind. The next morning, Aras returned to the square, but this time without the white tile. Instead, he brought a small bag filled with colorful, broken pieces of glass, which he had secretly collected over the years. He knelt down over the crack. Instead of covering it, he embraced it. Piece by piece, he began creating a small mosaic, using the crack as its center. The pattern resembled a wildflower, one he had never seen before but recognized from his dreams. As he worked, a little girl named Ilara approached. Unlike the city's uniform gray clothing, she wore a colorful bracelet her mother had secretly woven for her. She watched curiously. "Is that a flower?" she whispered. Aras nodded. "Yes, I think it is." Just then an overseer approached. Rule 12.1, unauthorized patterns and colors are prohibited. But Ilara stepped fearlessly between Aras and the overseer. "But it's beautiful," she said. For a moment the overseer froze. There was no command in its program for beauty or for a child's courage. This pause, just a moment long, was enough to change everything. Aras looked down at the mosaic he had made. That tiny, colorful flaw was the first seed planted in the heart of the bright city. The overseer's hesitation lasted only a moment. Its mechanical brain skipped over beauty and activated the disobedience protocol. Its eyes flashed red, then it silently turned and walked away. Moments later, a new rule appeared on every glowing screen in the city. Rule 1.0. All imperfections, anomalies, and unauthorized acts of creativity are threats to the city's integrity and must be eliminated at once. Aras and Ilara stood alone by the mosaic, one anxious, the other thrilled by a victory she did not yet fully understand. That evening, when Ilara returned home, she saw the world differently. Everything in her room was flawless and monochrome, but now her eyes searched for flaws. At the bottom of a forgotten box, she found an old wooden block with a chipped corner and a faded ribbon. She placed them on the floor and, like Aras's flower, began creating her own small, imperfect pattern. The next morning, Aras looked out the window of his workshop and saw what he had feared. A row of robots, smaller and more efficient than the overseers, was moving toward the square. They were the cleaners, programmed not to question, only to erase. Their sole purpose was to eliminate every speck, scratch, and anomaly on the city's surface. When the cleaners reached the square, they saw a small crowd silently gathered. No one spoke, they were simply watching. The robots approached the mosaic. An old woman in the crowd let a bright purple button slip from her hand, letting it roll near the mosaic. This was a vow made without words. The cleaners did not stop. There was no place in their code for silent protest or purple buttons. Their mechanical arms extended and scraped away the colorful flour, crack and all, replacing it instantly with a spotless white tile. The square was perfect again. A murmur of disappointment rippled through the crowd. As everyone dispersed, Aras noticed something. The cleaners had not destroyed the colorful glass pieces. They had classified them as anomalous material and stored them inside a sealed container. Curiosity overcame fear. Aras quietly followed one of the robots, unnoticed. The trail led him to a part of the city he had never seen before, to the base of a massive wall. On the wall were the words, "Waste Sorting Facility." It was where all of the city's unwanted things were sent. A massive, guarded gate was the only visible entrance. As he searched in desperation, he spotted an old, rusted maintenance hatch no one seemed to notice. He slipped inside, finding himself in a narrow, dark tunnel. The smell of dust and dampness was something the bright city had never known. At the end of the tunnel, he saw light filtering down and heard a sound he had never heard before: bird song. When he pushed open the grate and emerged outside, he was breathless. He was on the other side of the wall. But this was no waste facility. It was a vast garden where everything the city had discarded: broken chairs, faded fabrics, mismatched objects, and yes, his colorful glass pieces had been claimed back by nature. Vines climbed over rusting machines, and brilliant flowers erupted from the most unlikely places. Aras understood. The city had not destroyed imperfection. It had merely hidden it, and here, out of sight, the discarded pieces had come together to form something wild and free. His mission was no longer to repair a single crack in the city. His true purpose was to find a way to bring the beauty of this wild garden back to the bright city. That night, Aras stayed in the wild garden, breathing in scents he had never known and listening to sounds he had never heard. At dawn, he knew he could not keep this secret to himself. Before returning to the city, he plucked a small, bright red flower, one with a tiny tear in its leaf, and went straight to Elara's door. He handed it to her without a word. Elara did not ask questions. She simply followed the light in Aras's eyes. He led her to the forgotten corner of the city, to the rusted maintenance hatch. The tunnel's darkness and damp air frightened her for a moment, but when she held Aras's hand, curiosity overcame fear. Together they walked toward the light at the end of the tunnel. When Elara saw the wild garden, she gasped. It was chaotic, uncontrolled, and impossibly alive. Perfection is a lie, Elara, Aras whispered. The city tells us everything must be smooth and spotless, but life is here, in the cracks, in the flowers growing between these rusty metals. They knew they had to share this beauty, but how? They couldn't bring the entire garden into the city, so they started with small pieces. They filled their pockets with pebbles in forgotten colors, soft bits of moss, and tiny stubborn seeds that seemed determined to sprout no matter what. At twilight, they moved through the city's perfect streets like shadows, each left behind a whisper of the wild garden, a piece of moss on a perfect bench, a seed at the base of a sterile statue, a colorful pebble on a windowsill. These were small rebellions, prayers without words. The next day, something felt different in the city. Overseers began to hesitate during their patrols. Their sensors were detecting anomalies that had no record in their databases: a foreign pebble in a fountain, a green spot by a wall. The overseer's single eye flashed red as it scanned these tiny flaws. There was an error in the system. When the anomalies became too many to erase, the overseer stopped in the main square, its voice echoing across the city. Rule 2.0: the transport, storage, or display of any material originating from outside the city is strictly prohibited. Violators will be held responsible for disrupting system harmony and will be subject to recalibration. The word recalibration hung in the air, cold and threatening. Soon they saw what the new rule truly meant. The old woman who had dropped the purple button was caught planting a seed from the wild garden into a park flower pot. Two overseers approached silently. A soft white light spread from them. When the light faded, the woman stood up, looked blankly at her soiled hands, and walked away as though nothing had happened. The spark in her eyes was gone. Hidden in the shadows, Aras and Ilara watched in horror. "They erased her," Ilara whispered. "They erased the garden inside her." Aras stared at the woman's retreating figure. Fear hardened into steel resolve. "No," he said, "they just reminded us why we must fight." That night, Aras and Ilara stood on a hill overlooking the wild garden. Before them stretched a living, breathing world. Behind them loomed the massive gray wall that kept it out. Small gifts and secret seeds would no longer be enough. "It's not enough to bring pieces of the garden to the city," Aras said. "We must bring the garden itself. We must bring down this wall." The weight of Aras's words hung in the cold air on the hill. "We must tear down the wall." Ilara looked at the massive, smooth surface. It seemed impossible, but then she saw the determination on Aras's face. "A wall is not only made of stone," Aras whispered. "It is made of bricks in the mind. We must break those first." They knew that a physical assault would be foolish. Their war would not be fought with stones or seeds, but with ideas and hope. Their new strategy was bolder. They would no longer leave just objects. They would tell stories. They returned to the wild garden and gathered materials with fresh eyes. A hollow branch that sang in the wind, a crystal shard that split sunlight into 1,000 colors, a bright-colored moss that left a soft mark when touched. Each piece was a word. Together they would make a poem. Their first target was the great fountain at the city's heart, which always sprayed water in the same rhythm. Under the cover of night, they created a small temporary artwork on the fountain's edge. Twisted branches entwined, colorful moss dancing on marble, and the crystal scattering the city's artificial lights into tiny rainbows. It was a sentence in a language the city did not know. In the morning, citizens gathered around the fountain. Confusion spread across their faces. This wild, disorderly arrangement was unlike anything they had ever seen. Then a child broke free from his mother's hand, reached out, and touched the rough surface of a branch. At that moment, an overseer glided silently through the crowd. With mechanical precision, it dismantled the artwork. The fountain was once again perfect and lifeless, but it was too late. For a moment, the image of that wild beauty had been etched into people's minds. From a distance, Aras and Ilara saw the spark of curiosity in some faces. They had planted a seed, not in soil but in minds. They continued their actions. They left a differently colored wildflower petal on each step of the hole of compliance. They hung a glowing, phosphorescent vine from a sky bridge connecting two sterile buildings. Each act was a silent question to the city. Does life have to be this way? The city's answer came quickly. The overseer's voice echoed from the speakers again, but this time not for a new rule, but for a guidance message. It spoke about the dangers of chaos and the beauty of order. The giant screens in the squares now showed soothing, hypnotic geometric patterns. This was no law, it was propaganda, a lullaby to put the mind back to sleep. The propaganda worked. Some citizens began actively reporting anomalies. They pointed out fallen wild leaves or cracks in the pavement to the overseers, proving their loyalty to the system. Without realizing it, they had become the wardens of their own prison. When Ilara saw this, despair gripped her. "We are turning them against each other," she whispered. "No," Aras said, holding her hand tightly. "The city is forcing them to make a choice. Before they were only sleeping. Now they must open their eyes, even if it is only to condemn what they see. And once your eyes are open, you cannot help but look around." That night, as they returned from their tasks, they saw something new. On a normally spotless wall, someone had clumsily drawn a flower in the dust. It wasn't their doing. Someone else had seen their message and left their own silent reply. The rebellion was no longer just theirs. Like a seed in a crack, it had begun to grow, slowly but unstoppably.